Okay, our next lecture podcast is going to go into the endocrine system. So, in this, we'll be looking at how hormones regulate different processes in the body. So, we begin there in our outline by defining the endocrine system as consisting of glands, series of glands that we'll look at, and then the tissues and they contain tissues that secrete hormones, and these hormones are chemical messages that help regulate different things in the body. The things they regulate are metabolism, growth, and reproduction. So they're also associated with a lot of hormones are associated with behavior in animals. And here's an example out of your textbook about a hormone called testosterone that is involved. It's a male hormone that's involved in male behaviors of territoriality, aggression, and things like that. So, in this example, it studies these cichlid fish, and how the males are very territorial, and when they are protecting their territory, they have elevated levels of testosterone. So researchers can study this and see that during those behaviors, they are producing and making more testosterone. And so these relate to that type of behavior. There's a connection between the behavior and these hormones. Now, these hormones are, there's a lot of different types of hormones, but they all are secreted from glands and then get into the bloodstream. Again, the circulatory system plays a major role in the transport through the body, and they are secreted from cells that make up the tissue of these glands. They release from vesicles in those cells. They get into the bloodstream through, again, thin-walled capillaries. They travel to a target cell, and then this hormone will leave the bloodstream and get in that target cell and then perform whatever function it's going to be involved in, whether it's reproduction, assisting in process of reproduction, or um, metabolism. A lot of these hormones help to speed up or different process of metabolism. Um, there are some of these glands that are located in the brain, so they're actually part of the nervous system, and those are they function the same way, and they have these vessels that release these chemical signals, but we call these cells neurosecretory cells. So in the regular glands, we just refer to those as endocrine cells, but in the brain, and if they're connected with the nervous system, we're called neurosecretory cells. So again, they all function this way. There's a lot of different glands, and they function differently. They have different functions in the body. Um, so we mentioned some examples. We start with invertebrates like we do in all the systems we look at. We mentioned that there are invertebrates have a series of glands and hormones, just like vertebrate and complex mammals. And some of the hormones that they are involved with are processes of some invertebrates, like pigmentation and let's see, metamorphosis is a process. We see that a lot of insects go through change in form during their stages from immature to mature. And these are heavily regulated by hormones. We actually mentioned that hormone here in the outline. Ecdysone is the hormone that insects and use in this metamorphosis change, like a caterpillar into a pupae into a butterfly. Those are changes in form that are regulated by surges of ecdysone. Um, let's see. So we have some different ways in which once these chemicals get to where they're going, ways in which these hormones get into the target cell. And so there's some different signaling mechanisms that are involved in that process. And so we'll look at one here. So here's a water-soluble hormone. So we have some different type. We have lipid-soluble and water-soluble hormones. So the water-soluble hormones, like epinephrine is an example they're mentioning here, will attach to a protein on the membrane of this target cell. The protein will turn around and it will dump into the cell that hormone. So it basically goes through the protein. So it can't just go straight through the membrane into the cell. It has to have this protein on the membrane to allow it to get in. Once it gets in, it goes through a series of molecules called relay molecules, and this is called the signal transduction pathway. So before this hormone can get to do what it's got to do, it's got to go through these steps, and then it can reach what it's going to do. And epinephrine, one thing it does is it can convert glycogen to glucose. We might need glucose, and epinephrine can help to make that glucose available. And so it can do that conversion. That's the cellular response there. So that's one example. Another example is lipid-soluble hormones like steroids, and they act a little bit differently. Here's an example, like testosterone is a lipid-soluble hormone, and it can go straight through the membrane. No need for a protein on that membrane. It goes straight into the cell. It then will attach to a membrane once it's in the cell, and once it attaches to the membrane, it forms this complex that will be carried into the nucleus. And so lipid-soluble hormones like steroids will go into the nucleus with the protein complex. And it then goes and will go into the DNA that's inside the nucleus. It travels into the nucleus, and so the response is not just taking place in the cytoplasm of the cell. We're going into the nucleus, and it's going to change the code there. This hormone receptor complex hooks into part of the DNA, and now when the DNA goes through its steps to make a protein, remember back from Bio 1, the protein synthesis going from DNA to RNA to protein. Now, when it goes through that, it's going to be making a different code on the RNA, and then ultimately a different amino acid in the protein complex. And so when that happens, we have a protein that is different. We have a newly configured protein because of this connection here. All right, so that's how lipid-soluble hormones work. So we want to look, there are in the vertebrate endocrine system, there are more than about more than a dozen glands, and they secrete more than 50 different hormones. So of course we have more than just one hormone coming from the glands. Here are the human glands here, and we list these out in the outline, and we'll just run through these. We have the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the thyroid, parathyroid, adrenal medulla, adrenal cortex, the pancreas, the pineal, and the ovaries, and testes, and the thymus. All right, so these are the major endocrine glands that secrete hormones. Now, we just mentioned a few examples here as we go through. This is a chart out of your book showing all of those glands, what hormones they secrete, and what action those hormones are involved in here. And so we mentioned a couple here. The couple we go into are the thyroid and the pancreas. The thyroid glands secrete a hormone called thyroxine, and and that's referred to as T4, and then there's also another one, T3. Now, these hormones are involved in metabolism. That's the main function of the thyroid gland, and then these hormones help to speed up metabolism. We mentioned some examples in our textbook of if what happens if this is not functioning properly. So all these glands, they can have malfunctions, and they can either make too much of these hormones or too few of these hormones. So there's a balance here with with keeping the right amount. There's often these feedback mechanisms like we talked about in the last chapter that help with this. Hyposecretion, hypo is referring to underactive. You can have hyposecretion or hypersecretion. Hyposecretion is when it's underactive. So when that happens in this gland and it occurs during infancy and childhood, that's called cretinism. So cretinism is an example of a malfunction of the underactive. And so that's going to slow down that's going to slow down metabolism, hyposecretion. So it leads to lower blood pressure, overweight, and that type of thing. There's another condition called myxedema, and this is when it occurs in adults, and it's going to lower the mental activity and all the metabolic relationships as well. A goiter is when this gland swells up, and so this gland can become imbalanced, nutritionally imbalanced, and the gland can swell up. This is the location of the thyroid right here on the neck region, and when it swells up, it can form a goiter. All right, let's see, here we were. And then hypothyroid is lower. So we have hyper and hypo. I think I just mentioned hypo. Hyper is when we have too much thyroxine getting out, and that's going to speed up the metabolic rate. So it can increase blood pressure, irritability, nervousness. Those types of things are going to result if you have an overactive thyroid and hyperthyroidism. Okay, and then we also mentioned the pancreas, and we talk about it. The pancreas basically secretes two major hormones. These hormones are insulin and glucagon. So here's our pancreas here, and the two hormones it secretes come from the two types of cells that it has. It has beta cells and alpha cells. And the main function of this is for blood sugar homeostasis. It's to maintain homeostasis at about 90 milligrams per 100 milliliters. So if we go, if we have an increase in that, say you ate 3 Snicker bars for breakfast this morning, you're going to increase your sugars in your blood. Your pancreas will recognize that, and the beta cells will secrete insulin. Insulin goes to your body cells and gets your body cells to get some of that sugar out of the blood. Also goes to the liver and basically triggers your liver into getting some of that sugar and storing it. And that'll decrease it down, and that's called a feedback mechanism. If your body, say you skip breakfast and you have a lower blood sugar, your pancreas can help with that. And what it does is the other types of cells in your pancreas, called the alpha cells, they release another hormone called glucagon. Glucagon will do something to try to get sugar in the blood. And what it does is it goes to the liver. Remember up here we mentioned that some of that sugar can be stored in the liver. Glucagon can go and get it to break it down and release it to increase your blood sugar levels, and that's a homeostatic response, and that helps to maintain that level of blood sugar. There's other hormones in the body that are involved in a lot of things. We have estrogens and involved in reproduction and things like that, but those are the main hormones we listed there, and that's going to end our lecture for this.